So, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining my talk today. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll obviously talk a little bit about UX in general, and then my job as a UX researcher, and a little bit about kind of how I got there and the skills I use. So, to do a quick intro to me, my name's Laura. As Becky mentioned, I work at a company called EY Cern. So we are the design consultancy little segment within EY, which is obviously a pretty big consultancy. And yeah, my role there is senior design research consultant. As I'll talk about in a minute, there's a ton of different job titles for every job in UX, which gets really confusing. I'm also from Ireland, as you can tell from my accent. I'm a proud Irish woman. And then just a little couple of fun facts about me. I play the violin. I love music, and I'm also a cooking enthusiast and love cooking at home, which has served me well over lockdown. And just below, I've put my Twitter handle. I don't tweet too much, but occasionally a few UX tweets. If anyone is interested in giving me a follow. So just to recap, what I'll talk. First of all, we'll look at kind of what is UX, what is user experience, what does that mean within a business, and then some of the different roles within UX, and kind of how my role fits in amongst those. Then a little bit specifically about kind of my job, what I do on the day-to-day basis, and what skills are required to kind of enter a career in UX research. And then lastly, how I got there. And then as Becky mentioned, we can jump over to the Q&A. So what is UX? So UX is user experience. That's what it stands for. So user experience means kind of any touch point where a customer is interacting with a company, an organization, its services and its products. So that could literally be, if you're looking at like transport for Greater Manchester, it could be that bus route and kind of how that service has been designed and what your experience of that is. It could be an app, like a banking app or any kind of app you use on your phone. Or it could be a physical thing like a Hoover. So you could have a company like Dyson looking at kind of how their customers are interacting with their products and how they could improve that service. And also UX exists across all sectors. So from government, public sector, you have, UX people who are civil servants, through to the charity sector, through across private sector and all different kind of areas within that, whether it's travel, finance, software as a service, and just tons of other things. So it's really everywhere. And I think for me, one of the most important things about UX is that it's a user-centered process. So this means that kind of the main goal for a UXer is to identify the needs of their customer and then figure out how they can meet those needs with a simple solution that satisfies the customer and makes their product or service a joy to use. So kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of what UX is overall. And I've added a little picture there of some people sticking post-its on the wall. Post-its are a core part of UX and yeah, something that we kind of use a lot to workshop and get our work done together. So I wanted to give kind of an example of UX that we all encounter every day. So imagine that you're after a really specific pair of trainers. So you might type the name into Google and you find that those same shoes are available on 3 websites. So they're all the same price and you just select one at random. For most people, it's probably the first result that pops up on Google. So you go to the website, find the trainers, select your size, add to the basket, and then go to the checkout to pay. But once you get to the checkout, you find out that actually you can't use Visa debit to pay on this website, but that's the only card you have. So what do? You probably leave the site, click the back button, go back and select the same trainers from one of the other websites that had popped up. So if you were working on the UX team for that shoe website, one of your jobs might be looking at why customers are leaving the website and at what point they're dropping off, and then figuring out how we can kind of work to improve that experience and retain customers on the website all the way through to making a purchase. And in order to kind of achieve that, it takes multiple UX people from slightly different backgrounds and slightly different roles. But I just like to use that example to kind of explain maybe one of the things that the UX team might be looking at. So as I kind of alluded to at the start, there's a ton of different roles and job titles within UX, but a lot of them overlap. So you'll have kind of different elements of each role that, people would touch upon, whether they're a user researcher, so that's me. You have different types of designers, interaction designer, a UX designer, a UI, which is user interface designer, maybe a front end developer, someone who's doing content strategy. Sometimes they're called a UX writer as well. So that's someone who'd be actually writing the words that you see on a website. You might have a UX architect who'd be looking at kind of the structure of how things are laid out on the website. An analyst who will probably be looking more at quantitative data, so numbers and how many people took a certain action. You might have a service designer. So, for example, a friend of mine works for NHS and she's been, service designing the COVID testing process. So just kind of other examples of roles that touch on UX. And the other thing to mention that is that these roles often mean different things in different companies. So over the last few years, I've been a user researcher in 3 different businesses. So in the first 2 businesses, I was called UX researcher, and now I'm called design research consultant, but essentially doing the same job. And then for UX research, I'm not doing any visual design. It's kind of more strategic, kind of insights based, and looking at data and things like that. But I work alongside people across all these roles, and also more. So you might have heard of roles like product owner, different types of developers, whether it's like front end developer, as I've mentioned here, or more of like a back end, or there's so many different types. And then also kind of business analysts and other more like business oriented stakeholders. And so there's loads of roles. And when I was initially starting out and researching UX online, that was something that kind of floored me, because I thought, okay, I'm interested in UX, but I have no idea which of these roles I fit into. But actually, kind of the reason I created this slide is to highlight the fact that it's not important. And if you're interested in UX, I would definitely recommend just, starting to learn a little bit more about it. If you're at the stage of kind of applying for a jobs or apprenticeships or anything like that, just go for it. And I think it's such a flexible area that you'll really find your niche once you're kind of in the process. So yeah, don't let the kind of many titles overwhelm you. So what is UX research specifically? So my job and UX research focuses on understanding the behavior of customers. So looking at what they're doing, why they're doing it, what are their needs, what motivates them to use a product. And then the way I get to that kind of insight is through a variety of different research methods. So obviously at the moment, everything is remote because of COVID. But in the past, I was meeting a lot of customers face to face, doing things like interviews, usability studies, which is where you kind of look at an app or website and figure out if a customer is able to get from A to B. And then various other methods of collecting feedback. So that could be kind of surveys, or, there's so many. But really, it all boils down to the fact that my main purpose is making sure that the voice of the customer is heard within the business. So oftentimes, without a researcher, you might be creating products and services based on assumptions or your own personal experience. But without really bringing in that data from the customer, there's no guarantee that what you're creating will satisfy their needs, or will sell, or will make a profit, or will serve that person in the way that they need to be served. So talking a little bit about the kind of tasks that make up my day to day. So just to mention as well, so within EY Serin, we're working with a variety of different clients. And so my main client and the client I work with at the moment is a big UK high street bank. And so I'm working with them to help improve their app and also their online banking. And so kind of running research with customers and going through different tasks on online banking and app-based banking and figuring out what works for them and what doesn't. So a big part of my job is receiving briefs from stakeholders. So usually that is product owners and designers. So I'm getting on calls with those guys, receiving briefing documents, and within that document, they'll usually outline, why they want to run research, what they're looking to learn from that research, and kind of what the research will be used for. And so it's up to me then to look through that brief document, make sure I really understand what they're looking for so that I can translate that into a research project. And then talking through that with them to make sure that our vision is aligned and that I'll be getting out of the project what they're looking for. So that's a big part. The next is designing research studies. So that sounds really vague, but basically what that is taking the objectives that I've received from the brief. So essentially, what are the questions that my stakeholders want to learn? And then picking out what is the best research methodology to use to get those results. So if they want a large data set, I might run a survey or I might look at some website data around, things like click patterns, where are people leaving websites, etc. But if it's something where they want a little bit more kind of qualitative data, quotes, verbatims, understanding user needs, then it might be more of like an interview-based study that I would design. The next step and another big part of my role would be briefing a recruitment agency. So in order to find these participants to take part in my studies, I work with an external recruitment agency. So I'll go to them, I'll put together a brief. So, today we're looking at business banking. We want to recruit 6 customers who are using online banking to manage their business bank account. And those agency then will go off and find those people for me and then send on their details, and then we'll work together to set up that session. Another big part is running kind of collaborative workshops. And so, for example, if I've done a research study and I've emerged with some interesting insights, I might get the designers I work with together and we might run a workshop around, okay, we know that customers need this feature, and how might we bring that to life, and doing kind of some sketching, but you by no means need to be good at art. And yeah, just kind of working together to ideate around the insights. And I'd be kind of in charge of figuring out how that workshop's going to go and then facilitating that as well. Obviously, conducting the research. So as I mentioned, at the moment, all of our research is remote. So, setting up WebEx calls, dialing in, spending an hour with participants, showing them what we're working on, getting their feedback, and just learning a little bit more about them and kind of how they operate. Then another big part, kind of off the back of that, would be getting all those insights together, analyzing them to come out with the key themes, and then presenting that research back to the stakeholders. So at this point, I'll get the designer, product owner, developer, business analyst, whoever's involved, back on a call, and run through the insights and give maybe some recommendations about, okay, this customer really wants to pay in a check online, but actually that functionality isn't working properly. So how can we go about improving that for the customer? And talking through, what I found and the implications of that for them. And then another part is managing the research roadmap. So obviously receiving briefs from stakeholders means that I'm kind of having projects coming in all the time. And I had to figure out a good way to prioritize those projects and line them up essentially into a roadmap, working with senior stakeholders to figure out what's an up and coming priority, what can wait, what can maybe one of my colleagues help me to pick up. So just making sure that I stay on top of that prioritization, which I think is a big part of a lot of roles, outside UX, across all different types of of responsibilities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the types of research as well that I'd be doing. So this is a little graph that just is kind of helpful in explaining what UX research actually does. So you can see there on the left-hand side, there's behavioral and attitudinal. So those are different types of insights we'd be looking for. So behavioral might be like, how long before the bus arrives does a customer go to the bus stop to wait? And then attitudinal might be like, and how do they feel about that wait? And then along the bottom, you can see qualitative and quantitative. So many of you might know, but qualitative is kind of more like softer kind of insights. So more anecdotal things. Maybe this would be data you might capture with, 6 to 12 people. So it's a much smaller sample size. And you'd be focusing on things like looking at themes, examining quotes, and kind of, really exploring in depth. And then on the other side, you have quantitative research. So this is numbers based. So maybe you need a certain data set to, back up why you should be doing something. So for example, going back to the shoe example, that could be, okay, we see that, 15% of our customers are dropping off at the checkout. And that's the equivalent of, X amount of profit loss per day. So those kind of insights. And there's different ways of collecting these types of insights based on the needs of your stakeholders or your clients. So number one, and probably kind of this is my passion area, I would say, within UX research, is exploratory research. So this is looking at kind of overarching themes and needs. And often this takes place before you've even built a product. So say, for example, the bank are thinking of launching a new feature. I might go out and talk to customers about how they're managing their finances today, kind of, is there an area of need that's unmet? And so it's really kind of interview based and really connecting with the person and exploring kind of their life and their behavior. So yeah, I find that really interesting. Next is quantitative research. So as I mentioned, quantifying behaviors. So X% of customers do this, or we're losing this amount of profit, or things like that. And this might be collected via a survey. It could be using multivariate testing. So that's kind of like putting two versions of the website live at the same time and seeing which one performs better. And quantitative research is really useful if you're trying to, back up a design decision to senior stakeholders, because numbers really, really talk. Another one that is a really big part of my role is evaluation. So this is looking at an existing product. So say, for example, I'm getting customers to run through the process of downloading the banking app and then signing up to access the app. So I'd be actually looking at that product. How's the app working? How is the user responding? And is there anything that needs to change? So really evaluating that product. So then I also wanted to highlight some of the skills that I think were important for becoming a UX researcher, and kind of some areas that might be good to look into if this career is something that you're keen on. So number one is kind of having an analytical mindset, and I think kind of having critical thinking as well. So you don't have to be great with numbers, because I'm certainly not anywhere near a mathematical genius. But just having that kind of mindset where you can look at a piece of data and say, okay, what does this mean? And just always having that mindset where you're asking the why and probing further. I think that's something that's really important. So it's a great role for kind of a curious person or someone that's interested in getting to the root of things, which is definitely me. Another one that's helpful, and I don't have a degree in psychology, it's just something that interests me. So, I read things about it, but having an awareness of psychology and kind of human behavior is really helpful. And it's amazing kind of the recurring kind of psychology based behaviors that we see happening in research sessions all the time. So as I said, like, no need to have, a master's in psychology or anything like that. But just having kind of an awareness of why people do what they do. And also, I think that's something that you can totally learn on the job. And I've definitely picked up a lot more about that in the last few years just from being in the role. Another one is research methodology. So again, this is something that you can really learn so much about online. But a really big part of UX research is what we call right method, right problem. So being able to take the research question or the problem that you're looking to explore and match a method with that. So whether that's interviews, whether you're going to do a usability test, whether you're going to put a survey on the website, just kind of having that awareness of, okay, this method will translate to these results, and that's kind of the reason I'm going to do that. But again, there's so many blogs and books and things to read about this, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Another big one is communication skills and liking teamwork. And so I really enjoy working with colleagues, and that really energizes me. So I think that's a really important element of being a UX person, and also having those communication skills. So I guess there's no point in me going off and doing a research study if I can't communicate the insights back to the team. And again, that's something that I've really practiced, but something that's so important. And yeah, if you're someone that kind of naturally likes teamwork, it's definitely a good role to consider. And the next one is organizational skills. So sometimes when you're organizing a research study, you're kind of juggling a few balls. So you're trying to design the research and carry out the recruitment and set up all the meetings, make sure everyone's invited. So just kind of having that organizational background. And if you're working in kind of admin or a role like that, you'll be probably a pro at this. But it's something that is, yeah, really useful to have. And I guess someone that enjoys being kind of organized as well. If you're maybe a more last minute person, this is something that you might need to work on to enter this type of role, and something I'm kind of trying to improve all the time. Another one is an understanding of creating products. So it's good to have an understanding of how research fits into kind of the product development cycle, how you work with, say, a product owner or a designer, and how research fits in at the various stages. So kind of when would you do more exploratory research? How are you going to go about evaluating a product? And how are you going to make your research agile in a lot of places as well? So yeah, again, something that there's loads of information out there about this. Yeah, so I just think it's really something important to highlight. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how I got into UX research. So I think I've been working in a UX research role for just about 4 years now. So I wanted to talk a bit about kind of why I made the decision, what kind of pre-existing skills I had, and then what I did to make the leap. So a big one for me that I've already touched on was having that kind of natural interest in human behavior. So that was something that always kind of interested me, and I didn't really know how I could turn that into a career without becoming like a psychologist or a researcher, something similar. So yeah, just having that kind of innate curiosity about why people are doing the things they're doing is something that's really helped me, and also something that I've kind of built my career off. Another one is probably why everyone's in this talk today is a desire to have a digital career. So this was something that was important to me for a few reasons. I guess firstly because technology really excited me, and I kind of wanted to be, on the forefront of building new products and really kind of delving into that world of apps and websites and yeah, digital. And again, I really had no idea. I was like, okay, I'm interested in human behavior. I don't know how to do graphic design, but I want to work in digital. Where is that role? And UX research was kind of the perfect intersection between all of those. And then the last one, which I've already mentioned a few times, is a good ability to work in a team setting. At least I like to think so. Maybe my teams would say otherwise. But just, I guess, enjoying collaborating with others and feeling rewarded by, creating something that you have come together as a team to do is something that I really looked for in work. And I didn't want a job where I'd be kind of going into an office, sitting down at my desk every day and working alone all day long. So I think that side of things has worked out really well because I'm chatting to different people all day, and yeah, so just being someone that kind of enjoys that collaboration, I think is important. So what I did, so I did get a master's in design, but I think if there's one thing I can stress in this talk, it's that education, an educational background in design or psychology when you're coming to work in UX isn't important. And so I've only worked with a handful of people who have degrees in these areas. And I think everyone else has either been self-taught, like I previously had a manager who didn't have a degree at all, and he was one of the best designers I've ever worked with. Um, but obviously, my degree did help me to kind of make the leap. Um, yeah, and as well to mention, there's loads of kind of qualifications you can do online. Like you don't have to do a master's or a bachelor's degree or anything like that. There's loads of kind of small organizations that are doing UX certificates. Yeah, that you can have a look into. But that's just one thing that I did that helped me to make that progression. Next was reading loads of books and blogs. So I'm lucky in that way that I kind of like to read anyway. But there's so much out there, and I think that's one of the great things about UX is that it is something that you really can learn on your own. And it's such a kind of community-based um, role to work in. UX people love talking about their process and why they designed something in this way and how they did this research, and it's all online. And my next slide, I'll just list a few good resources that I started with that really helped me. Or just going online and googling the name of a book with PDF after it, and sometimes they'll pop up, or going on Amazon, going to the library, and there's just really so much that there's so much that can be self-taught, which is something kind of nice about UX. And a lot of the publications that are out there are really current, and there's new stuff coming out all the time. Another really big one, and obviously everyone that's here today is kind of on the ball with this, but going to meetups, and in Manchester, there's loads of design meetups. I'm sure a lot of them are online now. And just go, I used to just go and watch, and I still do, go and watch, senior UX people talking about a project they worked on or their role, and then just going up and, if you feel like it, having a chat with them after. And that really helped me. And the other thing is just reaching out to people that you find online. So if you see someone on Twitter or LinkedIn that you think might be a good contact, or you want to ask them a question, just drop them a line. And I think most people kind of in this industry would be more than happy to even have like a half an hour Google Hangout chat or something like that. It's really like that, I think, within UX, and something that really, really helped me to get my foot in the door and kind of get moving. And then I guess the culmination of all these things together, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different roles that I've had since I've entered UX research. So I started off at laterooms.com as a UX researcher. Sadly, Late Rooms is no longer with us and has shut down. But I worked there for less than a year, just kind of really learning about research and UX research in kind of an e-commerce style setting as well, and worked with some really great people there. Then I moved over to work at booking.com. So they're on Fountain Street in town. And in Manchester, the transport part of booking.com are based here. So I worked there for a couple of years, working on kind of booking.com rental cars, and learned an absolute ton. Had a great time working there. They've a lovely office, and yeah, it was a really good experience. And then most recently, I've moved to work at EY Serin. And so most of my team is based in London, but there is an EY office here in Manchester as well. And as I mentioned, the difference in this role is that now I'm a consultant. So whereas previously I was working in the company, working on their own website in-house, now I'm, working for an agency and working together with different clients that come into us, kind of on a project by project basis. So it's been really interesting to see, I guess, the different types of roles that are out there and available, and kind of what suits you best as well. because there really is such a wide variety, and this is just like a tiny, tiny, tiny handful of examples of things that you could do. My next slide, I put some resources. So I was just going to pause for a second. If anyone wants to take a screenshot of this, yeah, if you're interested, go ahead. I'll just leave it up for a minute. So there's some websites and some books as well that really helped me. And as I mentioned with the books, sometimes if you just Google the name of the book with PDF after it, I know back when I was like doing my master's, I found a ton of kind of free stuff online, which really helped me out. And then I just wanted to summarize at the end. So UX at its core is about helping businesses to prioritize their customers. So bringing the voice of the customer into the business and making sure that the customer is a part of the business decisions that are being made. And because ultimately they're kind of the most important person in a business or organization. Okay, I've already said my next point. So UX research, yeah, is about making sure that voice is heard and making sure that we're designing something that helps to meet their needs. Another really important one, and I think a really common misconception, you don't have to be a good artist to work in design. You really don't. And there's very little like kind of drawing involved, especially in my role, which is much more kind of strategic. So don't let that put you off. Another one that, yeah, is really important is everyone's journey into UX is different. And I think probably every single person that's working in another type of like professional environment has a ton of soft skills that are really, really applicable to a career in UX. Another thing I always like to mention as well is there are various tools that we use, like design tools and things like that, but they're changing all the time. And there's a lot of people that are learning those things on the job. So don't feel that you have to be an expert of Photoshop or Sketch or any of those tools, because there really is room in a lot of businesses for learning those things kind of on the job. And I know a lot of places hire more on kind of mindset and soft skills, and then teach the tools kind of there and then. And as I've already stressed as well, there's so much you can learn about UX online for free and without doing any formal education. I'm sure, like something I won't touch on today, but I'm sure it was mentioned in other talks, is sometimes kind of finding that entry level role to step in can be a little bit more difficult. But I think there's so many things you can do kind of before you get to that point to back you up. And I've seen people from all different walks of life. Like even in my last role, we hired someone who was a mental health nurse in the NHS for like 15 years, and now she's an amazing researcher. So that it really is that type of role where, you know, people from different backgrounds are really valued. And I'm sure for everyone, there's so much you could bring to the role that isn't on the team already. And I think that is everything.